Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. I'm Katie Z. Today is Earth Day, April 22nd. I'm here for the weekly update along with David Johnston.
Hey, everybody.
Hey there. All right, so lots of content to cover this week. So just to paraphrase some of what we're going to be getting into, we'll be getting into the recent discussions with the FSB, the Financial Stability Board, and also with recent happenings at PegNet, which is just a day or two ago. There was what seems to be a 51% attack on the proof of work mining and hash power, but there are some key differences of how PegNet differs from what you would traditionally find with a 51% attack for the better. So we'll get into the details of that. Also, we have the pTrader.co website with the TradingView integration. New videos have been posted to the YouTube, so check those out on how to get started and set up with that. So we'll touch on that, and let's kick it off. Let's kick it off with what happened about a day and a half ago with the 51% attack. Do you want to give some details of what happened there?
Sure. It's almost like a rite of passage in crypto that every new project is going to have people try to figure out all the angles, and 51% attacks are fairly common in proof of work systems. Like you said, what's unique in PegNet is because it's a decentralized application and the miners aren't involved in consensus, meaning they aren't building blocks for the transactions. They're not involved in user conversions. That's all done by the Ethereum or Factom protocols underneath. The only thing that miners in PegNet are doing are reporting the prices of the 42 assets on the network every 10 minutes. So they're coming to consensus about prices, not about transactions or conversions. So when a miner does a 51% attack, what they're really doing is trying to alter what those prices are for some period of time. So in this case, some miner came in, used a bunch of hash power, and for 2 blocks changed the price of peg Japanese yen much higher than it really is. And so when they did their conversion of yen into pUSD or whatever, it produced a ton of pUSD. Now, because it's in PegNet and there's no intermediaries, there's no reserve, there's no trading, they were effectively doing this only inside their own wallet. So nobody else's user funds were affected, which is how you want to build the DeFi protocol, where if there is an attack, it doesn't affect any of the users. Sort of reminds me of when somebody hacked Shapeshift a few years ago, and no user funds were taken because they don't hold any user funds. That's the key. PegNet was built so there would be no intermediaries and no user funds at risk. So this person generated all of these pUSD inside of their own wallet. I guess they went to the markets and realized that they couldn't just dump the tokens because there's a safety mechanism built into the PegNet that only allows 5,000 peg per block to be converted into. And that's in there for exactly this reason, to prevent somebody from taking a ton of pegged assets and dumping into peg, right? That's recognized very early on in the PegNet history as an attack vector. And so peg conversions were made one way, where you can convert from peg into p assets, but not instantly the other direction, right? In order to close off that attack vector. So this attacker ran into that safety mechanism and I guess decided they weren't going to get away with it and decided to burn all of the pUSD that they created. So they reached out to a developer, said, hey, give me a burn address. Developer happily provided them the burn address, and they destroyed forever all of those tokens that they sent to the burn address. So sort of interesting how it played out all within like 6 or 7 hours yesterday morning, from like when the attack happened to them realizing they couldn't dump and then deciding to destroy all of the tokens, or at least all of the ones that they sent to the address. People are still analyzing exactly what happened on the blockchain. But, you know, very, very curious case. You know, the person claimed that this is penetration testing, and they're just pointing out that there's ways we can improve the oracles, which sort of a very dramatic, stunty kind of way to do it. I don't know if that was their real intent or not. It's impossible to say, right? All you can really talk about is actions. They created all these tokens and then they destroyed all these tokens, and no other users their wallets were affected. So that's what we know.
So let's peel this back a little bit. Because it's on the blockchain, there's a lot of information that is transparent in this. And can you share what some of that information is? Are we able to identify who this person or people are, where they're from, or what role that I'm assuming that they're miners, that they're playing into the PegNet system? And then also, if you can also discuss on what happens with all those tokens now that have been generated.
So first of all, we can see on the chain that there were 4 miner identities involved. And there's a full report on the technical side that one of the developers posted. And happy to include that link. Yeah, we'll put that in the video, and people can check all of the details if they want. But in short, there were 4 miner identities. And it's impossible to say if it was a group of miners or it was just 4 identities used by one guy. We don't know. There's no connection between real world identity and the identities that the miners pick, right? They just pick some number of characters. You know, I'm, you know, Prosper Pool, Oracle, Oryx Pool, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? All the pools have identities, all the miners have identities, but they're just random characters that they can choose. So they had a lot of hash power, enough that they could submit these incorrect prices and have the majority of the hash power in order to sort of exclude the other miners' good data. And then after 2 blocks, they went back to reporting regular data. I haven't checked whether they're still mining on the system, but you know, if it really was penetration testing and they're trying to improve the system, then they may well still be there. They went very quickly back to normal behavior. So, you know, it's not like it was a prolonged thing. It was only 2 blocks, it was only 20 minutes that the process took place. And then what happens to all the tokens, they had created a bunch of addresses, sent these tokens to a bunch of addresses, and then eventually sent them to this burn address. The way a burn address works in crypto is you've got a unspendable address, this sort of artificial address that nobody can ever find the private key to. It's mathematically impossible. And so you create an address which, you know, there's an unknowable key to. In this case, it says burn baby burn, and then it's got 31 O's after that, right? You'd need more computation that is available in the current universe to calculate the private key. So they're gone. Like, they're destroyed forever. They will never be recovered or found or, you know, anything like that, at least in the current way we understand computation for a long time, right? So effectively, they've been sent to a burn address, and they're still on the chain. The tokens still exist. They're just unconvertible, untransactionable, unsendable, unrecoverable forever, right? So that's sort of an interesting way to sort of, the person was effectively wiping their hands and say, well, you know, don't hunt me down. I returned all the tokens, or I, you know, in essence, gave them all up. So, you know, and that's sort of claiming the mantle of a white hat hacker, right? Who may hack a system, but then doesn't take any value from people. Again, we don't know if that's the case, but that at least are the actions that we know happened. So those tokens, while they still show up on the blockchain, are effectively gone forever.
Okay. So who created the burn baby burn wallet address or burn address?
Who did?
Who did?
The developers name is who.
Very funny. Okay.
Yeah.
And who is who?
But from a technical perspective, it doesn't matter who created the address.
Well, I was wondering who had the sense of humor for
No,
creating that.
who did have the sense of humor? Yeah,
Okay,
that's right.
all right. And the best of our understanding that someone would want to burn those tokens is because they want to wipe their hands clean of, they want to be indemnified by the community, basically, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the recent DeFi attack on DeForce, somebody
Mhm.
took $25 million of other people's money, not
Yeah.
just like they created some in their own wallet, of other people's money. And the exchanges, the community, everybody mobilized like, we're going to figure this out. And they found his IP address. They were hunting him down. And he's like, I'm just going to return those tokens. No, no, no foul, no bad. Here's all the money back. I don't know if they'll ever find the guy, but obviously he felt, afraid enough that he didn't want to be tracked down for the rest of his life. So, he decided to return all the tokens. But ideally, and now DeForce has to go through a whole process where they're like, all right, we're pausing everything. We're going to figure out how to avoid this ever in the future. We have to make the system more robust. But that's because there were pooled funds. There was, if not a physical custodian, a smart contract custodian. This is why PegNet partly has never built on smart contracts. Is there isn't an automated way to, find some vulnerability in the PegNet code and take other people's funds out just by making a request. Wallets in PegNet are individual to the user. And when they add Peg and they burn it into pegUSD, that only happens in their wallet. There's no pool of tokens that they're pulling from or issuing from, which is common with what you see with smart contracts. Is it's, there's a pool of tokens, they have to be minted by the contract. In this case, PegNet is just using it as an accounting method and saying, oh, you had $1,000 of Peg, now you have $1,000 of pUSD. Great. They equal each other, burn one, mint the other, right? And so that burn mint model, I think, is a lot safer because it's a lot less complex. And complexity is the tough thing in all computer systems. The more complex they are, the more fragile they are. So, I think this is great validation of sort of the way PegNet is built. Now, there's definitely things that need to be done to improve the oracles in PegNet. I wrote a whole article and posted it last week on de-risking oracle sources. And there's sort of 4 layers. If you want to check out that post, there are effectively 4 layers, right? PegNet is trusting miners, to be honest, right? And you had it right there.
Did I? I'm sorry.
Yeah, PIP 13. And so effectively, it's trusting miners, to be honest, right? And there are things you can do beyond the aligned incentives, like the safety mechanism that Peg has implemented that prevents a miner from dumping into Peg. But there could also be rails in the software itself that watch for this type of erroneous data, right? The next thing is the miners rely on data aggregators. So they're all getting their information from pegnetmarketcap.com, coincap.io, et cetera, right? And if those aggregators provide bad data, that's another layer. So for instance, pegnetmarketcap.com recently implemented a software upgrade to watch for erroneous data and exclude it from getting reported to miners if it's found. So if there's some crazy 1,000% spike in a price, oh, that's a bad API, don't report that to the miners, right? So there's improvements that have already been done by pegnetmarketcap.com, which other aggregators could also do to improve the quality of the data. And then the aggregators on the 3rd level rely on the exchanges. They're getting all their information from Coinbase and Binance and all these guys, right? And so there are things the exchanges can do to make sure that their own APIs are working well. There's an exchange that had an API issue. It happens pretty commonly. And pegnetmarketcap.com had to exclude their data for a while until they fixed that bug, right? So the exchanges themselves can do things to watch their own data and to see if their users are causing issues that they don't expect with their system. So those are sort of the 4 levels: the miner, the aggregator, the exchange, and the user that generate and flow up all of that data. And what you want is effectively to have smart monitoring at every step. The exchange should see some weird behavior first on behalf of their users. The aggregator should see some weird behavior on the part of one of the exchanges. The miners, the software itself should see, strange reports from aggregators. And so at every level, you have an opportunity to catch that misinformation, that erroneous data, and exclude it from getting published to the blockchain. So that's effectively the big challenge with oracles, is we need to make more and more robust that whole chain of data.
And that's an ongoing task as well, too.
Yep.
Constant communication between the upline and downline groups as well, and constant monitoring. Now, this kind of segues nicely into the next topic that we wanted to touch on with the FSB. So a lot of those who are watching this video, I'm sure, have at least heard about by now different recommendations that are being discussed and reviewed for implementation by the Financial Stability Board. And this is around stablecoins. So David, you wrote a fantastic article. I love this article. It's going to be shared in the video description below. I recommend everyone to read it. David, you make it so easy to just pull out the important detail and distill it into, okay, so here's the key points and here's how to review it. And what's happening right now with the Financial Stability Board and these recommendations are, they're looking at it largely in part because of Libra, right? And Facebook's interest to create this new currency system. And so they're looking at, you are going to have to either classify as a regulated, centralized stablecoin, fully regulated, or on the polarized opposite side, fully, truly, utterly decentralized at every level and measure. PegNet is clearly from the beginning taking the steps to go to the latter, to be that fully, utterly decentralized system, and that's the aspiration of the community. Do you want to touch on give a high level of what's happening with the Financial Stability Board, shed some light on timelines, what we could expect, and also the relevance that it's playing in, particularly as Tether is interesting, as they passed 7 billion in their market cap, which is a lot of money. It's going to need to pivot some way, somehow.
Yes, that is going to be a big challenge for them, because effectively the gray area is going away. Either you have to be an extension of the central bank, or you have to be fully decentralized. But there's not going to be any in between anymore, not after these guidelines get finalized. So just to remind people, the FSB is an entity that came out of the G20. So this is the top 20 global economies. After the financial crisis, got together and said, hey, we should really have a group that focuses on the stability of the macro financial system. And what they came up with was the FSB. So the FSB is funded by the Bank for International Settlements, which is based in Basel, Switzerland. And their goal is effectively to make recommendations to the central banks. The central banks are the members of the SSB. So it's not an industry organization. It's literally the top 24 central banks in the world. Okay, so they said last year at the G20 meeting, hey, FSB, give us some recommendations on what to do on global stablecoins, because we've heard about this Libra thing. We're not sure what to make of it. You tell us what to do, right? Make your recommendations. And so they went away for a year, from July of last year to today in April, and said, okay, we've got 10 recommendations for you. And effectively they are, make stablecoins fully regulated. Transparent and audited reserves. They've got to have licensed entities. They need, custodians with XYZ. In every way, shape, and form, the central bank needs to regulate it. The local regulator needs to regulate it. There needs to be AML, KYC, anti-counterterrorism, the whole deal. All of this needs to apply to global stablecoins. And so these are draft recommendations until July 15th. That's when the public comment period ends, And presumably sometime after that, they'll issue a final set of recommendations after they've gotten everybody's comments, industry comments. But it was literally the next day that Libra came out and was like, okay, and here's the Libra 2.0 white paper. Here's how we're going to comply with all of the requirements set up by the FSB. So we're going to scrap that whole permissionless future thing. We're going to, institute a financial intelligence function, which I think is a great euphemism for they're going to watch everything and everyone on the system and be able to implement all of these compliance requirements, right? And so one by one, it's sort of changed what they really started out to do. And even they're getting rid of the Libra basket for the US, the Euro, the Pound, and the Singaporean dollar are going to have individual currencies for their citizens. So if you're in the US, you're going to get the Libra dollar, right? There'll still be a basket, but it may be regulated by the IMF for its constituents. So literally the International Monetary Fund will say, okay, you should have these many dollars and these many euros. And they got rid of sort of all the interesting things about the basket. Now it'll only be cash, as in like the currencies of the countries, or up to 90-day treasuries and government securities. So sort of all the more interesting things, maybe in the future, including Bitcoin or any of that, is out the door. So it's really a big pivot for Libra. And that's, where it's at is the FSB thing came out and then Libra right after.
Yeah, and I want to highlight, it's a little bit twofold. I think our audience is going to fall probably more to the latter side of what I'm about to say. But in large part, this organization is looking to protect their banks, looking to protect the investors and businesses from, major manipulation or fraud and black market. Who knows a lot of it, but on the other side, there's another side to that coin, no pun intended, that is, I'm stating the obvious here. Facebook already has exploited and continues to exploit their users' data, right? And now with this system that is surely going to be integrated in some form or fashion, it just gives them that one piece of data that they didn't have, which is your financial spending habits and what you're doing with your money. And so think about that. Now on the other side, the latter side of that, so that's on a fully regulated, centralized system, fully auditable, which PegNet is also. You have all that traceability with the money, with your stable coins, with your spending habits. And I have been I hate to use the word victim, but I've had my Chase bank account shut down because I had a deposit from Coinbase. They wouldn't say that, but that's what happens when you're on a centralized system, is that they do have that power that if there is some major monumental event, big or small, they can turn off your access to your funds and your money or confiscate it. On the other side, you have the fully decentralized, the utterly decentralized, as I'm calling it, side of stablecoins, which is where PegNet is, ambitiously working at. That is where you are your own issuer. There is no central body that is issuing that, overseeing that. So, and for that is why PegNet had the response system to all the users, where no users in the system were affected when that 51% attack, for lack of better words, happened. It's because of that. So I'm just going to throw that out there, but let's get into the current current stablecoin market. The key players being MakerDAO, which is the collateral based. They have had some issues that have been exposed with this market uncertainty time. And then now Tether is, I'm sure that they're working hard to figure out what their response is going to be at this moment, because they are operating in that gray system. They say that they do have this reserve, which would be that they're partly centralized. So David, are you able to share a little bit about how this could play out or what might need to happen?
Well, effectively, people will have to move in one direction or the other. Either they're going to become an extension of the central bank or they're going to become fully decentralized. So let's think through the major players. USDC is in a great position. Coinbase is already a member of the Libra Association. They're very likely to issue USDCs on the Libra blockchain, which will have known validators, which is one of the requirements that's being put forth by the regulators. Okay, and then you've got Gemini Dollar. All the reserve-backed guys really are likely to go in that direction. Now, the challenge that Tether has is they don't have any of those relationships. They've really struggled to keep open banks globally and even moved a lot of the money out of banks. It's in some sort of asset. I don't know what assets, but it's in some sort of asset globally, right? And they don't have roots in a jurisdiction where it seems like they'll be able to get sort of through all those hurdles. So you'd think maybe they'll move the other direction. Maybe they'll move towards decentralization, but that's also hard to imagine too with their reserve model. So they may well lose market share over time to the Libras and USDCs and Geminis, who are all going to be able to continue being listed on exchanges, right? The question is, when exchanges start seeing pressure to delist, just like they delisted security tokens or things they thought might be security tokens and moved purely to utility tokens, this is a similar moment. So they're going to look at all their stablecoins and say, which of these is likely to get us in trouble? And they're going to jettison whatever ones are likely to get them in trouble, right? And so it's going to be really interesting to see that play out. And then, like you said, on the decentralized side, Maker has moved more towards centralized. They're now using USDC as collateral. Yeah. So you're going to have to be in that regulated category if you're going to use that as the collateral. You know, they're saying they want to do both decentralized and centralized, but I think that's going to be really tough under these recommendations if you really read through the details. So, you know, something like PegNet that has no intermediary, has no reserve, is totally auditable on chain by the individual user, I think is in the best position by far. I mean, we've been saying this for a while. It's great, almost validation of the fact that you need these systems to be fully decentralized because the governments have gotten savvy. It only took them 7 years from the launch of stablecoins. Like that's about their learning curve, right? That's how long it took them to catch on to ICOs. And now it's been 7 years since stablecoins launched, right? So, you know, they've gotten around to it and maybe it's gotten to a scale that they care about. Like you said, Tether is over 7 billion. All stablecoins, I think, are at $9 billion. But my biggest concern is the centralization of Tether being 80% of the market. I think is really, really the dangerous part, is because if a single stablecoin, mostly Tether USD, fails, that's going to have huge repercussions because it is the most traded crypto in the world right now, even more than Bitcoin. So the sooner we can switch people over to decentralized alternatives, the better.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It will definitely have ripple effects if one of those major systems start to crumble. What the response is going to be, where do you put your money? Where do you feel safest? So yeah, and in terms of stable coins, either you're going to be centralized or you're not. So if you're looking for a stable option for your money right now, do you trust the dollar's value? Do you trust the banks? Are you comfortable with that? Or are you looking for more of the, you know, the offshore banking type of options and that you could have and have it de-risked somewhat from that manipulation? Or yeah. So anyway, interesting times, and I think quarantine is making people even more creative, I would say, with their time and what they're doing, how they're looking at things. What else can we cover on this week's update?
There have been a couple updates with pTrader. So pTrader.co, for those that haven't checked it out yet, has a really set of simple tools. It's a non-custodial wallet for people to basically connect to TradingView or to use for doing conversions. Yeah, it's right there, pTrader.co. And there's 2 new how-to videos to set up an account and how to connect the webhook from pTrader to TradingView, and both of those are probably really useful to, basically get everything set up and walk through any issues that you have in the setup. So, I would check that out and, just give it a try. It's really easy. It's web-based. There's no technical knowledge required. Big thing is write down your password as always, export your private key. You're in control. There's no recovery mechanism for pTrader because it's a non-custodial wallet, right? You are your own bank. You are your own asset manager in the case of pTrader. So, definitely be sure to do that. But other than that, it's pretty easy to use. You just sign up with your email real quick and get going. Deposit a little peg and test out the system. And yeah, whatever features you want to see, there's now a pTrader Discord server. So we can include the link for that. Jump in there, offer features, report any bugs. Definitely still alpha beta software. So, definitely don't put millions of dollars in it. It's in testing mode. It looks good. It's been testing for a few months now, and people are reporting a great experience. But, test it out and let us know what you think.
Yeah, always great recommendations. Back up your keys, your private keys. Test it. Don't dive in head first. Get comfortable with it first. Know what you're doing, and how the behaviors interact. Also, on that note, because PegNet is in building mode, still an early stage project, moving fast and rapidly, but it's still early stage. There's a lot of work yet to be done. Part of that is different community initiatives for getting more content out. They are things such as how to back up your private keys, basic stuff, all the way up to more advanced stuff, which is, the how to integrate with TradingView. So anyone who is interested they have a little extra time, they want to be involved, I'm sure that the community could pull together some bounty or reward for their contributions towards some of this content for PegNet. Also, there are, I just put out a spreadsheet yesterday in the PegNet Discord. There's 75 or so different DeFi integration opportunities that have been identified. I don't think that list is exhaustive, but it's pretty comprehensive. So that's another opportunity if you're either a software or a business developer, either or, and can see to it that those integrations happen. I'm sure that we could also pull together rewards from the community for that. So those are ways to get involved. That's a lot of the focus right now in this quarantine time, is getting some of that groundwork, put together for PegNet, the infrastructure, making that more robust. And yeah, so I'll leave it there. Anything else from your end?
No, I think it's been a busy week already, and it's only Wednesday. So yeah, just another day in 2020. Crazy stuff happening. But yeah, no, I appreciate everybody's awesome efforts to continue improving the ecosystem. There's a lot that still needs to be done. Staking looks like the coding is underway for that. So excited to see that. And hopefully that'll get out in testing in the next few weeks. And yeah, then it leads up to a big software update, right? And there'll be a ton of stuff that people want to include. Oh, we should add this asset or that asset and things like that. But, we can cover that in a future discussion as it gets a little bit closer.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add, David, I know that you have, a lot of these conferences have converted to a virtual model, or some have at least, Consensus being a big one. You'll be speaking at Consensus this year on the virtual conference. So if the community knows of different virtual conferences that are happening and you think PegNet is relevant, DeFi stablecoins during this time, reach out in the community. Would love to, it could be anyone from the community to volunteer to speak on behalf and get the word out in that way. So always looking for those opportunities, share them around, and we'll get on it. But that's it from me.
See you guys.
All right. Until next
Next
week.
week.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.